Welcome back to the Health Tech Crew podcast, where we explore cutting-edge world of technology and innovation in healthcare. I'm your host, Igor Gorlatov, partner at Kepler Team. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Matthew Floyd, a seasoned veteran and revenue growth executive at Floyd Executive Consulting. Matthew's diverse experience ranges from serving in the U.S. Army to leading innovation initiatives at Novant Health. We'll dive into his military background, the collaboration between Novant and Kepler that didn't quite pan out, and his new consulting practice. Buckle up as we explore the intersections of healthcare, technology, and leadership. So, hello, Matt.
How we doing? Good to see you, Igor.
Doing great to see you as well. I'm excited that we're able to do it here in Charlotte to record a not live, but an in-person version of the Health Tech Crew podcast.
Absolutely, same here. Glad to come into town for something like this.
So essentially, we connected when you worked at Novant Health Innovation Lab. You were part of Paula's team.
Correct.
You were responsible for launching Nexus program. So could you talk a little bit more about your experience there?
Sure. So when I was at Novant, I was the director of innovation for the Charlotte market. A lot of that was acting as a front door for startups. So we would go out and look for problem sets and then look for solutions as well, and try and play matchmaker, a dot connector, for these problems that we had inside of the hospital system and the solutions that were available on the market typically through startups. So we looked for innovative ideas and tried to find the right ways to integrate those into the healthcare system to increase efficiency and improve outcomes. One of the things that spun off of that as we really started to look at that pathway and how to get startups integrated into Novant was to generate this membership model where we would allow companies to come in. We had lots of ecosystem partners, nonprofits, VC funds, corporate sponsors, and to provide resources for these startup members as they came through, give them a peek behind the curtain, help them understand how the hospital system works, how it operates, what that integration pipeline looks like in order to help them get up to speed and be successful at Novant, but also at other hospital systems.
So very cool. We've interacted primarily around like Nexus.
Correct.
Right? But I know that you were involved on some other projects and some of them really took off. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. So we had several pilots that we were able to implement. We had Precision OS, which was a sort of provides X-ray vision into a patient and allows you to simulate and walk through the readings and the scans in virtual reality with the patient. So had a huge potential for driving understanding of the operation, understanding of the disease or the problem, and being able to explain what the problem was and how they were going to go in and fix it. And we were looking at other technologies as well that would allow integration inside of the operating room and that sort of thing. So it was very exciting, and we were in the pilot stages with them. We also were involved in Penumbra, which was providing respite for hospitals or for nursing staff in the hospital system. So distraction therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness training, that sort of thing, to help nurses and clinical staff really cope with the really stressful and traumatic experiences that they typically go through, especially in like a cancer center, which was the initial pilot for Penumbra for us. And then we worked with several different incubator type programs, so Nordic Amplify, Enterprise Ireland, trying to help funnel innovative technology that's being developed overseas into the U.S. healthcare system so that they could bring what was working in other markets, but helping them tackle the unique challenges that the U.S. healthcare system sort of presents.
So essentially all those three programs, they were ongoing at Novant Health.
Yeah, all of that was ongoing, and we had several other initiatives. Those were the ones that I was primarily a part of, but we had a growing team, and we're really taking on a lot of initiatives and trying to really build out not just the pipeline of startups into Novant Health. That was kind of the first thing we did. But then it was, okay, now how do we develop the ecosystem around it and really make Charlotte a hub for health tech?
So when you reflect on your time at Novant, what key lessons or insights have you taken from that?
Well, so one of the biggest things that I learned is just how complex and complicated and challenging it is to actually get inside of a hospital system. I mean, especially when you're talking about startups who typically have, these shorter pipelines or shorter runways, they don't have the runway to sit there through a 2-year sales cycle, right? So how do we, help them succeed, especially in the early stages, so that we can reap the benefits of their innovation and their creativity and problem solving down the road. And a lot of that was building in pipelines and trying to understand, okay, how can we create sort of a fast lane? How can we get the right people on board early? How can we make sure that we're engaging all of the stakeholders right there at the beginning, so that we're not getting 6 months in and then trying to, overcome the challenges that come with selling to different stakeholders inside of the system. I think, a lot of that red tape's justifiable. There's even inside of the healthcare system, different departments have different specialties, different knowledge sets, and trying to, have one doctor that can advise us on all technology is just unrealistic. And so, we had to create those types of relationships and pathways, and really the biggest thing that I took away from that was the value of a dot connector, right? The person that can say, this is the technology, this is the problem, these are all of the people that we need to get on board, and bringing all of those people together to make that decision, even though, I'm not necessarily an expert in, the types of technologies that we're integrating. So that was the big, I guess, challenges that we really tried to overcome, and really that I'm trying to continue to overcome now, that I've left Novant, is how do we create those types of fail fast models in such a high stakes environment.
So you mentioned a term like doc connector. Could you talk a little bit who those people are and how do you find them?
So it's a lot of just setting up meetings, making phone calls, having people make introductions. It's all networking. And it's a very purpose-driven networking, because you're trying to accomplish something, so you're looking for who can help me solve this problem. But once you've established that relationship, you maintain it, and that way when the next problem set comes along or the next solution comes along, you know who to go to tell you, hey, this is going to work, or this is a solution looking for a problem.
But I understand it's not just about expertise.
Correct.
People must be willing to contribute time, energy.
Exactly.
How do you go for finding such people, and then how do you go about finding such people and then actually recruiting them to your cause, which might not directly help their career or their finances?
So the thing that I realized is, there was no financial incentive, there was no, ulterior motive or anything like that behind the types of connections that I was making. So it was legitimately coming to somebody and saying, I think I can help you, here's how. And coming at it from a I want to help perspective, and taking that approach. And when you're actually able to help and be of value and make yourself indispensable in those types of relationships, then when you come back, you don't necessarily have to have them on the team. You don't necessarily have to have them involved. But when you reach out and say, look, I've got something I think can help, will you take a look at it? They're much more likely to do it because you've been helpful, and they know that you're coming at it just to help.
And I don't know, we haven't discussed sharing this, but maybe you could name a few people from the team who were extremely helpful or especially helpful.
Well, so I found that, inside of the healthcare system itself, you had a handful of teams that were very instrumental. The digital health and engagement team was hugely instrumental in getting stuff across the board or across the finish line for us. But the ecosystem at large, you had people like Scott Pope and Juan Garzon and Michael Levy, these people that are out there that have these organizations and have created these organizations geared towards helping startups and helping healthcare systems. And so, being able to lean on them and use them as mentors and use them as, network extenders, essentially, to say, I know this person and they know 25 people that can help me. And when you're taking that, keeping that helpful approach and just coming at it from a how do I make your life easier, then people are a lot more likely to extend those networks and be helpful back. So,
thank you for highlighting some names. I always try to put
absolutely.
a name to the person so that we know our heroes. So Novant Nexus, or even the whole Novant Innovation Lab, ultimately didn't succeed as anticipated.
Right.
I remember reaching out to you. We were supposed to collaborate on this mentorship component of it. And you said, oh, it's not happening. So what do you think were the main challenges or obstacles that contributed to this outcome?
Well, so I think there were a couple of things that kind of were at play there. One is that we just had such a broad mandate. We were looking for problems and looking for solutions anywhere and everywhere, right? And it was, we were able to showcase successes, but they weren't necessarily revenue generating or cost saving successes in every case. And so I don't think I realized we had the runway that we did, right? We were on a clock and didn't know it. And so, at the end of the day, and I don't believe Novant did that intentionally either. I just mean that, with the way that the industry was going and healthcare in general, the challenges that pretty much every healthcare system is facing, Novant was facing. And so when they looked to make cuts, we had not provided, that cost-saving value or that monetary value. And I think if we had come at it with a revenue-generating model right from the start and began implementing that right away, I think we would have been better off. Nexus was a revenue-generating model, and that was what you and I were working on. We were a couple of days away from, literally a couple of days away from launching, which was the frustrating part. But we could have launched that probably 4 to 6 months earlier. There was a balancing act. We had a lot of stuff going on, and so that was one of those things that was going to be, this is going to launch, and when it does, it's going to make us, self-sustaining. But not pushing the envelope, not pushing to get it done sooner, not trying to get across the finish line faster, I think is what ended up shooting us in the foot there. So it is what it is. At the end of the day, even nonprofit hospitals need to make money and need to watch their overhead. And at that time, we were 100% overhead, and so we didn't play out the way we hoped it would. But I think the model is still viable, and I think that other healthcare systems will be able to use it in the future.
So Matt, thank you for sharing those lessons learned. I've heard that it would be the focus on revenue generation, and also understanding that even if this runway is not explicit, it is still there. The hospital system gives you a certain period of time to figure things out. In addition to those two insights, what other things would you communicate if you were able to your younger self when you were just getting started with the Innovation Lab?
I think really the value of a network. That wasn't something that I came in ready to jump into. It was building that network and understanding the stakeholders. And I think if I had it to do all over again, walking in and saying, okay, who are the people that I need to know? And what are their roles, and what does this pipeline look like, and how do we map that out ahead of time and start making those relationships day one, so that you're not making them organically when you need them. I think that would probably be the only thing that I would have done differently. I think we had a lot of very quick successes and generated a lot of attention, a lot of discussion. But at the end of the day, if it's slow to get rolling, it's slow to get those wins, or if you're not generating revenue, not generating real value right from the get-go, then it's going to be tough to maintain yourself long term.
Thank you for sharing those insights with us. Since leaving Novant, you've started your own consulting practice. So could you talk a little bit about the services you provide and the types of clients that you serve?
Sure. So when I got out, started looking around at what else was out there in the job market, and realized kind of quickly that I didn't want to leave what I was doing. Right. I really enjoyed the work that I was doing at Novant, and so I tried to figure out ways to continue that. And so had a couple of very good conversations, a couple of very good mentors that helped me stand up this consulting practice. And so started out with startups, and that's where I'm at right now, is working with younger companies, typically pre-revenue or early revenue, trying to help them develop the processes that will allow them to scale. So focusing on priorities. How do we, when you're a startup with a small team, everything needs to get done, but certain things pay off more than others. And so helping focus in on the things that are going to pay off, both in the sales cycle as well as the relationship development and that sort of thing, but also helping to develop the business processes, the governance, the roadmaps, the strategic development mindset that allows a company to scale and continue to develop and build on what they've created. And so that's really been where my focus has been these past few months. Also working or in conversation with, hope to shortly be working with a handful of healthcare systems to help them stand up the same types of models that we were able to build out inside of Novant to generate better pipelines and better pathways for startups to get into healthcare systems.
This is awesome. In terms of, I like to get a little bit granular on this. So a typical startup that comes to you, how big is the gap between what they think they have in terms of plugging in and doing a pilot with a healthcare system and where they really are?
I think the big problem that I've seen pretty consistently is everyone wants to land a whale and they don't realize they're in a rowboat, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got to go after what's going to provide market validation, generate revenue to extend your runway, because even if you land, a Novant or an Atrium or one of these large hospital systems on day one, you've still got a very long very long sales cycle to actually get across the finish line. And it's very easy for a company to run out of runway before they actually land that client, especially considering the amount of effort that it takes to land that client and then implement. And so that's been the biggest gap I've seen with the startups that I've talked to, is they don't realize what that means from a long-term business perspective. But at the same time, even getting in that sales cycle provides some validity and some market validation to be able to go out and get other clients. So there is a two sides to that coin. But I think the biggest thing is really that value proposition, right? When I come to you and say, well, what is this startup? Typically, because you're living it day in and day out, you're breathing it, right? It's this 20-minute explanation of, what are we doing and how we're doing it, what we want to do and where we want to go, instead of that 3-word or 1 sentence, this is what we are and this is what we do. And so my first client was HireMe Healthcare. When I walked in there, that was one of the things I said was, okay, well, what is HireMe Healthcare? I've heard your pitch 3 times and I'm not positive what it is. And Ryan, the CEO, was very open-minded about it and was like, well, that's a good point. And so the first exercise that I did with them was using human-centered design to really narrow down what is HireMe Healthcare. And so came out with, after a couple of hours of really brainstorming and working through it, HireMe Healthcare is a nurse hiring platform that helps showcase the nurse behind the resume. And so
love it.
That's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. It gives you that initial understanding of what we're trying to do, and allows you to really kind of dig in a little bit deeper and realize all the incredible things that team's working towards. So that's typically where we sit when I come into those conversations is, what are you doing? What do you want to do? And then being able to build that value and understand how to sell it to the various stakeholders inside of the healthcare system that are going to be part of that decision-making cycle.
I love the example with HireMe Healthcare.
Yeah.
And this is awesome, the way you kind of summarized and you remembered the exact value proposition, which speaks to this is what you, as a startup, this is what you want to do. You want other people to come in and share that perspective. They will not talk about for 20 minutes about your startup, but they might be able to share this one-liner of value proposition.
Exactly. Because we all want to talk about things we're passionate about, and so it's narrowing that focus, being able to say stuff concisely, which I always struggle with, being able to say what you want to say as concisely as possible, so that you're not getting the glossed over look before you finish explaining what you're doing.
I wanted to come back to the whale analogy that you gave. So there are whales like Atrium's, Novant's of this world, and there are others. Mm-hmm. So could you talk a little bit about other organizations that the startups should look at when their kind of end game is to land Novant or land Atrium?
So one of the big questions that always gets asked, and one of the questions I always asked when I was fielding pitches at Novant was, well, who are your other clients? And if it's a really novel technology, there is value in being the first one to market, right? We're the first one to bring this new technology on board, but there's a lot of risk associated with that. And if it's not truly novel, and I don't mean the approach, I mean like something that no one else is doing, right? If it's not truly novel, if you do have competitors, you're going to need to be able to walk in and say, well, I'm working with these 3 other companies, or I'm doing, X, Y, and Z. And so going after the biggest clients that you can get, whose sales cycles you can survive, right? And starting there and then working your way to smaller and smaller fish, right? Because some smaller hospitals, they may only have 3 stakeholders or 3 decision makers to engage. They may be able to move faster. They may be able to get something implemented in 3 to 6 months instead of the 2 years that it takes a larger healthcare system to go through sometimes. And then if those sales cycles are getting too long or dragging out, then you go down to individual clinics perhaps and start to look at, we just need to get in the door, and the fewer decision makers that we need to engage, the better off we are. And so that's really the approach that I've been recommending is what's the smallest company, it doesn't even have to be, a moneymaker. It can be, what would be considered maybe a loss leader, right? Something that you're going to lose money at, but it's going to help land the next client and the next client, and those clients get progressively larger.
So you talked a little bit about this, but could you talk more about the types of organizations you are particularly interested in helping, and what is the kind of help they can expect when working with you and your consulting practice?
Yeah, absolutely. My knowledge base is really more around digital health, IT-based solutions, but really anything in the healthcare space. I'm able to bring kind of that inside information or inside viewpoint of this is what it looks like actually trying to get adopted in a healthcare system. This is who you're going to need to engage. This is what it's going to take to sell. This is what it's going to take to implement. And understanding the priorities of those different hospital systems as well. And so that type of understanding I'm able to apply to a broad spectrum of healthcare clients, where I can actually dig into the weeds and solve, programming problem. Well, not necessarily, I'm not a programmer, but development cycle problems or governance problems, that sort of thing is really more in the digital health space. And so that's something that I've been really excited about doing, is coming in and saying, okay, this is how you need to document. This is how you need to, to maintain your scope and to maintain your focus. And, if this is priority 1, then we don't need to focus on anything that's going to detract from that priority, right? And so that's been a big help with a couple of the companies that I've been working with is just building out those systems so that as they grow and as they build and as they land clients, they're able to keep track of the work that they need to do to continue to improve and continue to be a game changer in the space.
Let's transition to your military career. Could you describe some of the most impactful experiences or insights that you gained through your time in the service?
Military career really was kind of a monumental experience from a development perspective. A lot of people, when you come into the military or come at it from a military mindset, especially when you're thinking about it from the outside looking in. For people that are not veterans and don't have that military experience, it's usually, well, you're disciplined and hard work ethic and, that type of thing. And that's true, but the things that I really took away from the military from an experience perspective were really the value of a good leader, right? It's tough to understate, the value of a good leader in an organization and the detriment of a bad one. I won't get into that, but having someone that's a good leader that can really problem solve and look after people and get people moving in the same direction, I think is really something that had a huge impact on me. And I don't think I really realized it until I was leaving the military. I was looking at getting into coding or trying to figure out what my next career was going to be. And a friend of mine was looking to hire, and he said, I can teach you what you need to know about business. I can teach you what you need to know about IT. I can't teach you the leadership experience and the planning experience that you're bringing from the military. And so that was kind of an eye-opener for me, and something that I've reflected on a lot. So the other aspects were, perspective. It really gave me a lot of perspective. When I left, it was moving into different IT fields and working as a leader in different IT companies, and really just being able to say, hey, at the end of the day, I'm going home. That was a big shift, and something that allowed me to handle incredibly stressful situations in a way that a lot of my peers kind of struggle with sometimes. And I think that's really the value of bringing a veteran on board a company is they're trained for life and death. And so when it's not life and death, it's not gonna shake them. It's not gonna rattle them, And so one of the ways that I learned that in the military was by going through some incredibly stressful and challenging experiences. And probably the most developmental of that was a course called Sapper Leader Course. And I just remember, going into a training mission at this course, and we hadn't slept for 72 hours. We'd had one meal a day. It was 15 degrees outside. We had 100-pound packs on. We're going 3, 4, 5 miles between locations, and then making the decisions, right? And so being able to make those decisions when you've created and generated all of this stress and all of these external factors that inhibit decision making, and still forcing yourself to confront and make the decision and tackle it, I think is an incredibly powerful lesson that you really can't get outside of the military unless you really look for it, right? And so that was something that changed the way I viewed, my capabilities and the perspective that I tackle new challenges with.
Those are very tangible or examples that you can almost feel what it, or I don't know. I had pictures in my head seeing you with a backpack.
It was
walking.
rough. It was rough. It was rough.
It's even hard to imagine what it was really like. But I wanted to pick on the point you made about leadership, that you gain exposure to great leadership in the military. Could you talk a little bit about what does great leadership look like from your military experience?
Well, so the leaders that I learned the most from, probably my NCOs. So sergeants in the Army, they're the ones that actually run things. The officers are decision makers. The sergeants are the ones that get it done, right? And so I had a couple of really incredible sergeants that taught me a lot about leadership. And even though technically, they were reporting to me, they were the ones that I was leaning on for everything. They were the ones that I was learning from, and watching them interact with their sergeants and their soldiers, and understanding, the quality of leadership that they possessed. And pretty much all of that comes down to they cared. They cared about the people that were working for them. We were riding up and down roads in Iraq looking for roadside bombs. It was something where, people are looking to you to make decisions, and you're looking to the people that are carrying those out. And it's incredible to know that they are truly invested and truly care about the people that you're working with. So
That's a great example again. How have these challenges you faced in the military, or this exposure to leadership that you saw or had in the military, translated to your entrepreneurial journey and also like career in innovation space and healthcare?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, as a leader in the military, you're doing a couple of things. One is you're planning, and the other is problem solving, right? So you're making a plan, and that plan is really, the plan itself is worthless, because Mike Tyson said, no plan survives getting punched in the face, or everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So I mean, and that's true. Like nothing that you plan typically will work out exactly as you planned it. So the plan itself is pretty worthless, but that planning process is everything. That's what makes or breaks a good leader, is understanding this is what I want to do, this is the decision point, right? This is when we need to determine, is this working, is this not, what do we do next? And understanding where those decision points are along the pathway and planning those contingencies so that you can change the plan as those challenges bubble up, and as you face problems, and as you get punched in the face, right? And a lot of that is problem solving, right? You've got to be able to look at something, understand the root of the problem quickly, and be able to try to create or look to those that have solutions and bring those on board quickly. And I think that was, that's really something that has carried over pretty much everywhere that I've gone. And then I guess going back to the sergeants, right? They're the ones that have 20, 30 years of experience sometimes in the military. They're the ones that know how to do the job. They're the ones that understand it. And so, you're coming in with 2 or 3 years of experience, and you're expected to be in charge, and knowing that you're not the smartest person in the room is an incredibly valuable capability or characteristic. And I typically was not the smartest smartest person in the room when it came to those types of decisions. And so being able to look at it and say, okay, you tell me what you think, and then listening and actually taking it into account and planning accordingly and executing accordingly. And so I'm not a health tech person. I've never built anything health tech wise. I'm not a healthcare professional. I don't have that expertise. And so being able to say, okay, I need a cardiac surgeon to be able to weigh in on this solution, to be able to tell me if it is what I think it is. And taking that approach just in general with life, a solid pathway, I think.
Very cool, and I liked how you connected it to the experience of being not really knowledgeable about the specifics of the work.
And you don't have to be good. As a matter of fact, the best leaders typically aren't that knowledgeable about what they are. They're good at getting people on board, bringing people together, and listening to the people that know what they're talking about.
I would agree. In terms of switching gears a little bit, could you talk about books that you're reading right now?
Sure. One of the books that I'm reading currently is called Loon Shots. I'm still early into it. I do not read as avidly as I used to or would like to. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting take that talks about how you give room, not just for the long shots and the moon shots, but for the crazy ideas, right? Uh-huh. And you give people room to explore those crazy ideas, because you never know quite where they're going to lead. And so that's been a really interesting book.
Is there a formula for this?
If there is, I haven't gotten to it yet.
Because I was working with a company just last week, mm-hmm. and they were also figuring out, it's like a product company, and they were figuring out what's the right ratio of effort. We have all those things that are needed for a mature company, and we mm-hmm. need to mature our product. This is what customers are asking. We know it will create value. But then we also want to grow much faster than kind of the market. And for that, we need those moonshots. But how much do we invest our limited resources between those two buckets?
That's a tough one, because you don't want to, if it's a moonshot or a loon shot, you really don't want to bet the farm, because there's a reason it's a crazy idea, right? But at the same time, those crazy ideas are the ones that really change industries and change companies. And so you want to give room to explore it without committing to a point that it puts your the future of the organization in jeopardy. And that's different for every company, right? Some companies have, the bandwidth to explore that. Some companies don't. And so, but whether you have the opportunity or the bandwidth to explore it, you still want to leave room for those ideas to flourish. Because when you do have resources or do have bandwidth, you want to be able to allocate it where you can.
Yeah. I feel this is always kind of, it's painful to be deliberate about moonshots and crazy ideas. And when everything is hectic, to protect some of the time for that stuff, or some team members for that.
That really is, especially in the startup world, you've got so many things going on. How do you protect the crazy idea that just might be what puts you over the edge or makes you, one of these unicorns that can really explode?
I'll place a bet like Novant Health on having an innovation lab.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't bring you revenue from day one. And how do you protect something like that when it's not mature enough?
In that example, I'll go back to, if you're in that type of environment where you've been given the runway, make sure that you're doing it in a way that's smart and self-sustaining, right? Make sure that you're tackling it from a way where your pathway you want to take you to self-sustainment so that you don't have to be protected, right? You protect the launch, but you don't protect an indefinite investment into something that may or may not prove out, right? So there's painful values that were learned there, right? We had the loon shot. We were protected. So how do we protect ourselves and make sure that we're returning that, and making it so that it doesn't need to be justified anymore because it's panning out.
I wanted to get your perspective on another idea I came across. I actually saw it in an article published by Todd Dunn from Atrium Health, where he talks about innovation teams need to balance, creating something new and fancy and shining that requires protection, but also saving money in simple things, in the way the current resources are being used, innovating on the saving side, so that this way you create resources to fund the kind of shiny and one-shot side.
I mean, you think about it, everybody thinks, when you think innovation, typically you think the iPhone, you think this shiny new thing that's going to revolutionize, the world. But a lot of innovation is just, let's find ways to do the things that we're doing better, right? Let's go back to the basics. Let's figure out how do we do things well at the small scale so that over the large scale we get that innovative, return, or that return on innovation. Because it's had a couple of friends in the special forces community, and one of them told me one time, he said, the difference between the regular soldiers and the special forces are that we do the basics so well that we don't have to think about them, right? It's being able to do all the little things right so that you can focus on the bigger problems. And that's innovative, right? Being able to look at the small things. How are we handling referrals? Is there a better way to do this? How are we handling pre-authorizations? Is there a better way of doing this, right? Those are not revolutionary ideas or revolutionary spaces necessarily, when you're thinking about them like that, but they can be. And you can create innovation in the small things that generate large scale innovation long term.
So we talked a little bit about the book that you're reading. I remember when we had a call preparing for this conversation, you were on the lake.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, how do you spend your time? Do you have free time? Any particular hobbies or interests that you've got?
Yes. So basically, you get me outside and I'm good to go, right? So whether it's fishing, hunting, hiking, kayaking, going riding ATVs, whatever. I don't do a lot of camping anymore because camping sort of lost its luster after spending a bunch of nights in the woods in the Army. But I'll stay overnight if there's a reason behind it. But I don't go camping just to camp. But other than that, if you could get me outside, I've got a smile on my face.
And how often do you do it?
It varies. During the summer, we try to get out on the lake as much as we can. Take my family out. teaching my son how to swim, and so probably once or twice a week we'll be able to get out and go do something, whether it's going to family farm or going on the lake or going fishing or something. During the winter, I spend a lot more time outside because hunting seasons run through the winter, and so probably every other day, maybe more, I'll get outside for a few hours at least.
Very cool. I need to do more of that. I'm staying too much indoors, but this is inspiring. I wanted to ask you about advice for your younger self, but not just a couple of years younger, but if you were talking to yourself or younger people today who are graduating high school and they're considering like military career, healthcare, coding, innovation space, what advice would you share with them?
An exercise that I did, I believe, junior year, maybe sophomore year in high school was kind of profound, and believe it or not, I'm still on that pathway.
Really?
Was to map out where I wanted to be in 5, 10, 15 years. And so it was like, okay, I can go here, and if I go here, I could do this, or this, and just continue that map tree, that logic tree on out, and see, where I want to go, and understand where I needed to make those changes or what those decision points were to adjust and move into something different. And that was really kind of interesting for me. And so everywhere that I look, every job that I've taken, everything that I've looked at from a career perspective, it's okay, what are the next 3 jobs after this, right? And not necessarily what are the only 3 jobs after this, but where could this take me? And really mapping that out and trying to develop yourself and make decisions about your career with those next 3 or 4 steps in mind.
And what does a step look like?
Well, so for me, it was I wanted to go into the military, and so it was, well, I can go to this college or this college, right? And if I go to West Point, which is where I ended up going, then I'm guaranteed a career in the military. If I go to the Citadel, which was my second choice, I could still go in the military through ROTC, but if that doesn't pan out for whatever reason, then maybe I'll move over to IT or the code and start developing from that perspective. And so, as things progressed, it was okay, well, after I get out of the military, then what, right? And so it's, well, maybe I can go back and do IT, right? Maybe I can go do these other things. Maybe I can do project management. And if I do project management, where's that going to lead me, right? What are the next career paths there? Now, I will say I stumbled into healthcare. It was not I say stumbled. It was very much when I got the opportunity, I jumped at it. But it wasn't something that was necessarily on my roadmap from that perspective, but it was very much I wanted to be a change agent in organizations and communities and ecosystems. And I think that, that's the pathway that I've moved into and really kind of look in 2-3 steps. What are the things that I can do now that are going to help me help develop partnerships, community, ecosystem around startups and around healthcare in the future? So
what are the most exciting pieces on your roadmap for the next 6 months?
So some of them I can talk about, some of them I can't. But I do have several different things kind of coming up in the near future. One of the very exciting things is going to be standing up a chapter of DHIT, the Digital Health Institute for Transformation, here in Charlotte, and so I'll be leading that and putting together some events around that. Also going to be working with Blue Door Group, which is a consulting firm here in Charlotte. And so there'll be another avenue for me to move into startups and help startups from a fractional perspective. And then hoping to be able to announce in the next few weeks that they'll be working with the healthcare system to implement some of the pipelines and front door systems that we created at Novant to help generate pathways for startups to integrate into healthcare. And then have to keep your eyes peeled on the news. We did with HireMe. We actually had some good news this morning that I'm not sure I'm at liberty to discuss yet, but keep your eyes peeled on that. And hopefully by the time this comes out, it'll be all over LinkedIn. So.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Matt,
Thank
for
you.
your time and wonderful answers.
I appreciate it. Great talking to you, Igor.
Great talking to you as well.
Matthew, thank you for sharing your insights and experiences, both from your time at Novant Health and your military service. Your perspective on innovation, leadership, and the challenges of collaboration in the health tech space has been enlightening. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on the Health Tech Group, brought to you by Kepler Team. We build software for health tech innovators, focusing on defining scope and building HIPAA-compliant health tech products. Join us next time for more insights into the world of healthcare technology. Until then, stay innovative.